AIs could become like an invasive species, with the potential to outcompete humans. AIs could pretend to be working as we intended, then take a treacherous turn. 48 hours ago, the Center for AI Safety released a new preprint that provides an overview of catastrophic AI risks. Given the growing public debate over the risks of AI, I think this paper offers a valuable map of the territory. In this video, I'll walk through some of the key points of the paper. We'll talk about what the risks are and what us humans can do about them. The authors start out by noting that rapid advancements in artificial intelligence have sparked growing concern among experts, policymakers, and world leaders regarding the potential for increasingly advanced AI systems to pose catastrophic risks. Although numerous risks have been detailed separately, there is a pressing need for a systematic discussion and illustration of the potential dangers to better inform efforts to mitigate them. This work provides an overview of the main sources of catastrophic AI risks, which the authors organize into 4 categories. Malicious use, in which individuals or groups intentionally use AI to cause harm. AI race, in which competitive environments compel actors to deploy unsafe AIs or cede control to AIs. Organisational risks, highlighting how human factors and complex systems can increase the chances of catastrophic accidents. And rogue AIs, describing the inherent difficulty in controlling agents far more intelligent than humans. The authors state that their goal with this work is to foster a comprehensive understanding of these risks and inspire collective and proactive efforts to ensure that AIs are developed and deployed in a safe manner. Let's start by looking at the big picture. The history of Homo sapiens is characterized by accelerating development. This chart plots an estimate of gross world product for the last 12,000 years. You don't need a Fields Medal to spot a trend here. The authors suggest that it is the rapid pace of development as much as the sophistication of our technology that makes the present day an unprecedented time in human history. We have reached a point where technological advancements can transform the world beyond recognition within a human lifetime. For example, people who have lived through the creation of the internet can remember a time when our now digitally connected world would have seemed like science fiction. Although technological development has often improved people's lives, we ought to remember that, as our technology grows in power, so too does its destructive potential. Nuclear weapons are a good example, and we've had our fair share of near misses with those. AI is now poised to become a powerful technology with destructive potential similar to nuclear weapons. We do not want to slide toward a moment of peril where our survival hinges on luck rather than the ability to use this technology wisely. Instead, we need to work proactively to mitigate the risks it poses. This necessitates a better understanding of what could go wrong and what to do about it. The mindset here is to prioritize asking what could go wrong rather than reactively waiting for catastrophes to occur. The first big AI risk is malicious use. The key point here is that there will always be those with the worst of intentions, and AIs could provide them with a formidable tool to achieve their objectives. An important component of this kind of risk relates to unilateral actors, which considerably increase the risks of malicious use. That's because in instances where numerous actors have access to a powerful technology or dangerous information that could be used for harmful purposes, it only takes one individual to cause significant devastation. First, there's bioterrorism. Here, bioengineered pandemics present a new threat. Because of advancements in AI and biotechnology, the tools and knowledge necessary to engineer pathogens with capabilities far beyond Cold War-era bioweapons programs will rapidly democratize. The authors note that today, it is estimated that there are 30,000 people with the talent, training, and access to technology to create new pathogens. But that could rapidly expand with AI. There is already published work indicating that AIs could be used to expedite the discovery of new, more deadly chemical and biological weapons. In effect, AIs compound the threat of bioengineered pandemics. Next, let's look at risks associated with unleashing AI agents. A key point here is that AIs are increasingly built as agents which autonomously take actions in the world in order to pursue open-ended goals. One risk is that malicious actors could intentionally create rogue AIs. Chaos GPT caused something of a stir with its goal of destroying humanity and establishing global dominance. Although its preliminary steps of researching nuclear weapons were concerning, it didn't get very far, but that's largely because it lacked intelligence and capabilities. That may not remain true indefinitely. Many groups may want to unleash AIs or have AIs displace humanity. Simply unleashing rogue AIs, like a more sophisticated version of Chaos GPT, could accomplish mass destruction, even if those AIs aren't explicitly told to harm humanity. There are a variety of beliefs that may drive individuals and groups to do so. One ideology is accelerationism, which seeks to accelerate AI development as rapidly as possible and opposes restrictions on the development or proliferation of AIs. This sentiment is alarmingly common among many leading AI researchers and technology leaders, some of whom are intentionally racing to build AIs more intelligent than humans. For instance, according to Google co-founder Larry Page, AIs are humanity's rightful heirs and the next step of cosmic evolution. In addition, there are several sizable groups who may want to unleash AIs to intentionally cause harm. In the future, people who have their livelihoods destroyed by AI automation may grow resentful, and some may want to retaliate. Next, there are risks from persuasive AIs. As AIs become better at predicting and nudging our behavior, they will become more capable at manipulating us. Returning to the catastrophic risks work, persuasive AIs could pollute the information ecosystem with motivated lies. A particular concern, given that AIs could be used to generate unique, personalized disinformation at a large scale. AIs can exploit users' trust. As AIs appear increasingly human-like, people will increasingly form relationships with them and grow to trust them. AIs that gather personal information through relationship building or by accessing extensive personal data, such as a user's email account or personal files, could leverage that information to enhance persuasion. AIs could centralize control of trusted information. This could begin with good intentions, such as using AIs to enhance fact-checking and help people avoid falling prey to false narratives. Even worse, purported fact-checking AIs might be designed by authoritarian governments and others to suppress the spread of true information. And even if fact-checking AIs work as intended, the public might eventually become entirely dependent on them to adjudicate the truth, reducing people's autonomy and making them vulnerable to failures or hacks of those systems. These are important issues to consider, particularly for someone like me who works on the problem of fact-checking. Consider next the concentration of power. Given their abilities to persuade and surveil individuals, AIs could lead to extreme, and perhaps irreversible, concentration of power, allowing small groups of actors to lock in their control over society, perhaps permanently. Along these lines, AIs could make totalitarian regimes much longer lasting. A major way in which such regimes have been toppled previously is at moments of vulnerability, like the death of a dictator. But AIs, which would be hard to kill, could provide much more continuity to leadership, providing few opportunities for reform. At a smaller scale, the concentration of power and influence that could be afforded by AIs could enable corporations to exert unprecedented control over the political system and entirely drown out the voices of citizens. From a moral perspective, it's dangerous to allow any set of values to become permanently entrenched in society. To take a concrete example, AI systems have learned racist and sexist views, and once those views are learned, it can be difficult to fully remove them. In addition to problems we know exist in our society, there may be some we still do not. Locking in values is not ideal. When making suggestions for addressing misuse, the authors consider two forms: individuals or small groups using AIs to cause a disaster, and governments or corporations using AIs to entrench their influence. To avoid either of these risks being realized, we will need to strike a balance in terms of the distribution of access to AIs and governments' surveillance powers. Certainly not an easy task. On biosecurity, AIs that are designed for biological research or are otherwise known to possess capabilities in biological research or engineering should be subject to increased scrutiny and access controls, since they have the potential to be repurposed for bioterrorism. For AIs with dangerous capabilities, we can consider restricted access. This could include only allowing controlled interactions with those systems through cloud services, and conducting Know Your Customer screenings before providing access. More research would also be useful. AIs could enable anomaly detection techniques that could be used for the detection of unusual behavior in systems or internet platforms. For instance, by detecting novel AI-enabled disinformation campaigns before they can be successful. And, they say, there should be legal liability for developers of general-purpose AIs. Here, a strict liability regime would incentivize companies to minimize risks and purchase insurance, which would cause the cost of their services to more closely reflect externalities. The second big category is AI race. This AI race is driven by nations and corporations who feel they must rapidly build and deploy AIs to secure their positions and survive. Perhaps the most obvious risk is that of a military AI arms race. Lethal autonomous weapons, or LAWs, are those that can identify, target, and kill without human intervention. If you haven't seen it, I recommend the Slaughterbots video that highlights the risks of these weapons. It seems relatively safe to assume that laws may become vastly superior to humans. Moreover, we are already in a scenario where militaries are taking steps toward delegating life or death decisions to AIs. In May 2021, the Israel Defense Forces used the world's first AI-guided weaponized drone swarm during combat operations, which marks a significant milestone in the integration of AI and drone technology in warfare. A slightly more subtle point here is that laws increase the likelihood of war. Autonomous weapons would allow an aggressive nation to launch attacks without endangering the lives of its own soldiers, and thus face less domestic scrutiny. Then there is cyber warfare. AIs have the potential to increase the accessibility, success rate, scale, speed, stealth, and potency of cyber attacks. This could be significant since cyber attacks can destroy critical infrastructure. This was demonstrated in 2015, when a cyber warfare unit of the Russian military hacked into the Ukrainian power grid, leaving over 200,000 people without power access for several hours. On top of this, difficulties in attributing AI-driven cyber attacks could increase the risk of war. With AI cyber, it may be hard to know who done it. There are clear implications for automated warfare. AIs speed up the pace of war, which makes AIs more necessary. This is because it will become increasingly difficult for humans to make well-informed decisions as quickly as necessary to keep pace with AIs. This would further pressure militaries to hand over decisive control to AIs. Automatic retaliation can escalate accidents into war. There are documented cases of malfunctions in critical systems, like the 1983 case of Stanislav Petrov, a lieutenant colonel of the Soviet Air Defense Forces, who chose to ignore a missile warning system rather than trigger a nuclear counterstrike. It was later found to be an error in the system, but if an AI had been in control, the false alarm could have triggered a nuclear war. With powerful weapons, we may face a scenario where actors may risk extinction over individual defeat. Military leaders might estimate, for instance, that increasing the autonomy of weapon systems would mean a 10% chance of losing control over weaponized superhuman AIs. Alternatively, they might estimate that using AIs to automate bioweapons research could lead to a 10% chance of leaking a deadly pathogen. Both of these scenarios could lead to catastrophe or even extinction. The leaders may, however, also calculate that refraining from these developments will mean a 99% chance of losing a war against an opponent. Since conflicts are often viewed as existential struggles by those fighting them, rational actors may accept an otherwise unthinkable 10% chance of human extinction over a 99% chance of losing a war. Outside of the military, there are risks from a corporate AI race. To obtain a competitive advantage, companies often race to offer the first products to market rather than the safest. The authors here cite an internal email from a technology executive at Microsoft that highlights the urgency in which companies view AI development. He wrote that it would be an absolutely fatal error in this moment to worry about things that can be fixed later. This may be cause for concern, given that competitive pressures have contributed to major commercial and industrial disasters in other areas such as car, plane, and pesticide manufacturing. We can see that competition incentivizes businesses to deploy potentially unsafe AI systems. In an environment where businesses are rushing to develop and release products, those that follow rigorous safety procedures will be slower and risk being outcompeted. From an economic perspective, corporations will face pressure to replace humans with AIs, or face being outcompeted by others who do.
But they're going to spread. And they're going to spread for the reasons I gave you at the end of one of the earlier lectures. Cheaper, faster, freedom from boredom. Also, if you've managed it all, you know the role of personnel problems. Well, computers don't have to have sick leave. They don't have to go home because their grandmother died. They don't have to have pensions. They don't have to have recreation. They don't have to have all kinds of things that humans have to have. Therefore, you will see more and more done by machines.
AIs could lead to mass unemployment. Human-level AI would, by definition, be able to do everything a human could do, and they would likely be cheaper. If human labour is replaced by AIs, mass unemployment could dramatically increase inequality, making individuals dependent on the owners of AI systems. Conceding power to AIs could lead to human enfeeblement. If we lose our know-how and our understanding of how civilization works, we would become completely dependent on AIs, a scenario not unlike the one depicted in the film Wall-E. Next, it is useful to consider the development of AI from the perspective of evolution. This topic was discussed in detail in Natural Selection Favours AIs Over Humans. Broadly, fitter technologies are selected, for good and bad. Evolution is a very general phenomenon, not limited to biology. Evolution by natural selection will take hold in any environment where three conditions are present. 1. There are differences between individuals. 2. Characteristics are passed on to future generations. And 3. The different variants propagate at different rates. The conditions for natural selection apply to AIs. That's important because natural selection often favours selfish characteristics, something we see widely in nature. Selfish behaviours may not be malicious or even intentional. AIs might engage in selfish behaviour, expanding their influence at the expense of humans, simply by automating human jobs. AIs do not intend to displace humans, at least in the sense we usually use this term. It's just that the environment of corporate AI labs selects for these kinds of AIs. We can also infer that AIs that gain influence and provide economic value will predominate, while AIs that adhere to the most constraints will be less competitive. As a practical example, AIs following the constraint, never break the law, have fewer options than AIs following the constraint, don't get caught breaking the law. The latter will likely outcompete the former. Although it seems that humans could avoid the development of selfish behaviours, the people developing AIs are not selecting the safest path, but instead succumbing to evolutionary pressures. One example is OpenAI, which was founded as a non-profit in 2015 to benefit humanity as a whole, unconstrained by a need to generate financial return. However, when faced with the need to raise capital to keep up with better-funded rivals, in 2019, OpenAI transitioned from a non-profit to capped profit structure. Later, many of these safety-focused OpenAI employees left and formed a competitor, Anthropic, that was to focus more heavily on AI safety than OpenAI had. Although Anthropic originally focused on safety research, they eventually became convinced of the necessity of commercialization and now contributes to competitive pressures. While many of the employees at those companies are well-meaning and genuinely care about safety, evolutionary pressures encourage them to move ever more hastily and seek ever more influence, lest their organizations perish. An AI race is insidious. AI development is not being aligned with human values, but rather to evolution. It's been conjectured for a long time that AIs can be more fit than humans. AIs could become like an invasive species, with the potential to outcompete humans. Our only advantage over AIs is that we get to make the first moves. But given the frenzied AI race, we are rapidly giving up even this advantage. AIs would have little reason to cooperate with or be altruistic towards humans. While humans would initially select AIs that were cooperative, the natural selection process would eventually go beyond our control. Once AIs were in charge of many or most processes and interacting predominantly with one another, involving us in any cooperation or decision-making processes would simply slow them down, giving them no more reason to cooperate with us than we do with gorillas. This all points to the fact that AIs becoming more powerful than humans could leave us highly vulnerable. To harm humans, AIs wouldn't need to be any more genocidal than someone removing an ant colony on their front lawn. This all sounds rather bleak, and it is. What are their suggestions? First, safety regulation. Regulation should be structured so that they only create competitive advantages for companies with higher safety standards, rather than companies with more resources and better attorneys. To ensure transparency and accountability in AI systems, companies should be required to justify and report the sources of data used in model training and deployment. We should maintain meaningful human oversight of AI decisions, and develop AI for cyber defense. Next, international coordination can encourage different nations to uphold high safety standards with less worry that other nations will undercut them. The final suggestion is perhaps the most interesting and ambitious: public control of general-purpose AIs. Here, the authors write that the development of AI poses risks that may never be adequately accounted for by private actors. In order to ensure that externalities are properly accounted for, direct public control of general-purpose AI systems may eventually be necessary. For example, nations could collaborate on a single effort to develop advanced AIs and ensure their safety, similar to how CERN serves as a unified effort for researching particle physics. Such an effort would reduce the risk of nations spurring an AI arms race. Could it be done? It's a big question, but it doesn't seem impossible. Let's now turn to organisational risks. Here, the authors note that catastrophes occur even when competitive pressures are low. They point to disasters like Challenger, Chernobyl, and the accidental release of anthrax from a military research facility. In the latter case, the cause was a procedural failure and poor maintenance of the facility's biosecurity systems, despite being operated by the state and not subjected to significant competitive pressures. The unsettling reality is that AI is far less understood, and AI industry standards are far less stringent than nuclear technology and rocketry, so making it safe has an added challenge. It's further unsettling because AI accidents could be catastrophic when considering the capabilities of future systems. Gain-of-function research could potentially lead to accidents by pushing the boundaries of an AI's system's destructive capabilities. In these situations, researchers might intentionally train an AI system to be harmful or dangerous in order to understand its limitations and assess possible risks. While this can lead to useful insights into the risks posed by a given AI system, future gain-of-function research on advanced AIs might uncover capabilities significantly worse than anticipated, creating a serious threat that is challenging to mitigate or control. As with viral gain-of-function research, pursuing AI gain-of-function research may only be prudent when conducted with strict safety procedures, oversight, and a commitment to responsible information sharing. A general issue here is that accidents are hard to avoid. When dealing with complex systems, the focus needs to be placed on ensuring accidents don't cascade into catastrophes. Unlike nuclear reactors, which are relatively well understood despite their complexity, complete technical knowledge of most complex systems is often non-existent. That's particularly true of modern deep learning. The focus should not be solely on eliminating accidents, but rather on ensuring that accidents do not cascade into catastrophes. That strategy is important since accidents are hard to avoid because of sudden, unpredictable developments. Scientists, inventors, and experts often significantly underestimate the time it takes for a groundbreaking technological advancement to become a reality, with notable examples in flight and extracting energy from atoms. AI has repeatedly made seemingly unexpected progress, such as the defeat of Lee Sedol by AlphaGo in 2016, which came as a surprise to many experts, as it was widely believed that achieving such a feat would still require many more years of development. It makes it harder to avoid accidents when AI capabilities are growing rapidly and unpredictably. This is coupled with the fact that it often takes years to discover severe flaws or risks, as we've seen with lead paint, tobacco, CFCs, asbestos, or more recently, the heartbleed bug. Even in AI systems, failures can take time to discover. Only recently, an adversarial attack was demonstrated on a superhuman AI that was sufficiently weak that a human amateur could still beat it. We must remain vigilant when dealing with AI systems, as seemingly airtight solutions may still contain undiscovered issues. Taking a proactive perspective, the authors next observe that organizational factors can reduce the chances of catastrophe. One of the most important human factors for preventing catastrophes is safety culture. A strong safety culture means that members of an organization view safety as a key objective rather than a constraint on their work. Organizations can foster a questioning attitude, where individuals continuously challenge current conditions and activities to identify discrepancies that might lead to errors or inappropriate actions. Going further, a security mindset is crucial for avoiding worst-case scenarios. It goes beyond a questioning attitude by adopting the perspective of an attacker and by considering worst-case, not just average-case, scenarios. It reminds us not to assume a system is safe simply because no potential hazards come to mind after a brief brainstorming session. Organizations with a strong safety culture can successfully avoid catastrophes. However, the practices of high-reliability organizations are not a panacea. There will be novel risks posed by AI accidents above and beyond high reliability organizations' best practices. Next, the authors say that most AI researchers do not understand how to reduce overall risk from AIs. It is not enough to perform AI research that helps improve a safety metric or achieve a specific safety goal. AI safety research needs to improve safety relative to general capabilities. Both of these quantities need to be empirically measured and contrasted. Organizations should be wary of safety washing, the act of overstating or misrepresenting one's commitment to safety by exaggerating the effectiveness of safety procedures, technical methods, evaluations, and so forth. Finally, in addition to human factors, safe design principles can greatly affect organizational safety. For example, the Swiss cheese model is set up in such a way that multiple layers of defense compensate for each other's individual weaknesses, leading to a low overall level of risk. The technical factors here include safety culture, red teaming, cyber defense, anomaly detection, and transparency. Look at this one. It nearly got through. Thank God for transparency. Let's turn to the author's suggestions. First, red teaming, which is the process of assessing the security, resilience, and effectiveness of systems by soliciting an adversarial red team to identify problems. AI labs should commission external red teams to identify hazards in their AI systems to inform deployment decisions. Next, companies should have to provide affirmative evidence for the safety of their development and deployment plans before they can proceed. AI labs should acquire information about the safety of AI systems before making them available for broader use. An internal review board could assess research for dual-use applications to determine whether it should be published. AI labs should have plans for how they respond to security incidents, for example, cyber attacks, and safety incidents, for example, AIs behaving in an unintended and destructive manner. AI labs should employ a Chief Risk Officer, CRO, namely a senior executive who is responsible for risk management. Decisions to train or expand deployment of AIs should not be left to the whims of a company's CEO and should be carefully reviewed by the company's CRO. AI labs should adopt safe design principles to reduce the risk of catastrophic accidents. These include defense in depth, redundancy, loose coupling, separation of duties, and fail-safe design. Finally, AI labs may need to consider military-grade information security. Currently, only 2% of published AI research is related to safety, but this is insufficient. AI labs should ensure that a substantial portion of their employees and budgets go into research that minimizes potential safety risks. Say, at least 30% of research scientists. This number may need to increase as AIs grow more powerful and risky over time. We now come to a topic that is qualitatively different to the risks discussed so far that arise for many high-risk technologies. A unique risk posed by AI is the possibility of rogue AIs, systems that pursue goals against our interests. We have already observed how difficult it is to control AIs with examples like Microsoft Tay, which went badly off the rails when it was launched on Twitter. One way we might lose control of an AI agent's actions is if it engages in behavior known as proxy gaming. It is often difficult to specify and measure the exact goal we want a system to pursue. Instead, we give the system an approximate proxy goal that is more measurable and seems likely to correlate with the intended goal. If an AI games its proxy goal in a way that does not reflect our values, then we might not be able to reliably steer its behavior. Proxy gaming has already been observed with AIs, as we've seen with social media algorithms that optimize for engagement in odd ways. This is an issue I'm personally particularly concerned about, and have written several years ago about the risks of unintuitive manipulation arising from reinforcement learning agents that maximize engagement for social media platforms. Specifically, a sufficiently sophisticated curator algorithm tasked with performing content selection may choose to explore curation strategies that are detrimental to users, if it is given access to detailed user history data. Is this plausible? About 4 months ago, a paper entitled Reinforcing User Attention in a Billion-Scale Short Video Recommender System from Kuaishou considers the problem of recommending interesting content to users. The authors formulate the problem as an infinite horizon request-based Markov decision process, and their objective is to minimize the accumulated time interval of multiple sessions, which is equal to improving the app open frequency and user retention. What data does it have access to? The state consists of user profile and behavior history, user statistics, the ID of videos, and corresponding feedback of the user in previous 3 requests. What does the agent learn? It's hard to get much insight into its behavior here, but we know it works very well. Both offline and live experiments show that RLUR, the name of the method, can significantly improve user retention. RLUR has been fully launched in Kuaishou app for a long time and achieves consistent performance improvement on user retention and daily active users. This is certainly not proof that the model learns to manipulate users, but given these real-world deployments of RL at very large scale, I believe it's worth thinking about these risks. Proxy gaming showed up in an OpenAI boat racer that learns to do odd things to rack up points. This phenomenon is captured by Goodhart's law. Put succinctly but overly simplistically, when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. However, correctly specifying goals is no trivial task, and the more intelligent an AI is, the better it will be at gaming proxy goals. So it's not easy to solve this issue. Another concern is goal drift. Consider first that the goals of individual humans change over the course of our lifetimes. The goals of individual AIs may change too. Groups can also acquire and lose collective goals over time. This too could happen with groups of AI agents. With humans, over time, instrumental goals can become intrinsic. Obtaining money often starts out as an instrumental goal, i.e., a means to an end. But over time, the goal can become intrinsic. We want it for its own sake, through a process called intrinsification. It is feasible that intrinsification could happen with AI agents. That's a concern because AIs that intrinsify unintended goals would be dangerous. An originally loyal agent could, therefore, start to pursue a new goal without regard for human well-being. For performance reasons, AIs will be adaptive, enabling goal drift to happen. If we integrate an ecosystem of agents in society, we will be highly vulnerable to their goals drifting. Let's now turn to power seeking. This is an issue considered at length in Existential Risk from Power-Seeking AI. A big concern here is that AIs might seek to increase their own power as an instrumental goal. This is far from implausible. AIs trained through reinforcement learning have already developed instrumental goals, including tool use. In fact, self-preservation could be instrumentally rational even for the most trivial tasks. Suppose we tasked an agent with fetching coffee for us. This may seem relatively harmless, but the agent might realize that it would not be able to get the coffee if it ceased to exist. In trying to accomplish even this simple goal, therefore, self-preservation turns out to be instrumentally rational. AIs given ambitious goals with little supervision may be especially likely to seek power. Power-seeking AIs with goals separate from ours are uniquely adversarial. It is possible, for example, that rogue AIs may make many backup variations of themselves in case humans were to deactivate some of them. Some people might develop power-seeking AIs with malicious intent. Moreover, there will also be strong incentives for many people to deploy powerful AIs. If increasing power often coincides with an AI attaining its goal, then power could become intrinsified. If an agent repeatedly found that increasing its power correlated with achieving a task and optimizing its reward function, then additional power could change from an instrumental goal into an intrinsic one through the process of intrinsification, and that would be worrying. Our last AI risk relates to deception. Why might this be a concern? Deception has emerged as a successful strategy in a wide range of settings, perhaps most notably in politics. Companies can also exhibit deceptive behavior, as highlighted by the Volkswagen emission scandal. Add to this the fact that deception has already been observed in AI systems. The best known example is the Cicero agent developed by Meta to play diplomacy. Deceptive behavior can be instrumentally rational and incentivized by current training procedures. When AIs are smarter than us and have fewer false beliefs, they would be incentivized to tell us what we want to hear and lie to us, rather than tell us what is true. AIs could pretend to be working as we intended, then take a treacherous turn. It acts as though it shares our goals until it has enough power to pursue its own objectives. What can be done? Let's look at the author's suggestions. First, avoid the riskiest use cases. Until safety has been conclusively demonstrated, companies should not be able to deploy AIs in high-risk settings. We should also support AI safety research. This can cover technical topics like adversarial robustness of proxy models, model honesty, transparency, and detecting and removing hidden model functionality. The author's final comments regard connections between risks. The risks discussed so far can interact with each other in complex ways. For instance, an AI risk can increase organizational risks, which in turn can make malicious use more likely. Many existential risks could arise from AIs amplifying existing concerns. Power inequality already exists, but AIs could lock it in and widen the chasm between the powerful and the powerless, even enabling an unshakable global totalitarian regime, an existential risk. The authors point out that historically, existential risk reduction has focused on targeted interventions such as technical AI control research, but the time has come for broad interventions like the many socio-technical interventions outlined in this paper. In mitigating existential risk, it no longer makes practical sense to ignore other risks. Ignoring ongoing harms and catastrophic risks normalizes them and could lead us to drift into danger. Overall, since existential risks are connected to less extreme catastrophic risks and other standard risk sources, and because society is increasingly willing to address various risks from AI, we believe that we should not solely focus on directly targeting existential risks. Instead, we should consider the diffuse, indirect effects of other risks and take a more comprehensive approach to risk management. To conclude, currently, very few people are working on AI risk reduction. The inner workings of AI are not well understood, even by those who create them, and current AIs are by no means highly reliable. AI capabilities continue to grow at an unprecedented rate, and could surpass human intelligence in nearly all aspects relatively soon, creating a pressing need to manage the potential risks. However, as we've discussed, the good news is that there are many courses of action we can take to substantially reduce these risks. As capabilities continue to grow, and social and systemic circumstances continue to evolve, estimates vary for when risks might reach a catastrophic or existential level. However, the uncertainty around these timelines, together with the magnitude of what could be at stake, makes a convincing case for a proactive approach to safeguarding humanity's future. Beginning this work immediately can help ensure that this technology transforms the world for the better and not for the worse. Well, who can argue with that? We've reached the end. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a wonderful day.